We are taught that the California Gold Rush was the ultimate American dream. We are told it was a time when ordinary men could strike it rich with a pickaxe and a dream. We learn about 49ers who left everything behind to seek their fortune in the gold fields of California. But this is the romanticized version of history. It ignores the most important question: who actually got rich during the gold rush? And how did they do it? If you want to understand how America's first economic bubble really worked, how speculation can be more profitable than production, and how the real money is always made selling tools to dreamers, you have to look past the prospectors. You have to look at the supply chain. The California Gold Rush wasn't won by the people digging for gold. It was won by the people selling shovels to the diggers. This is the story of America's first platform economy, built on the backs of suckers with gold fever. The accidental discovery. To understand this economic deception, we must travel to California in January 1848, to a lumber mill owned by John Suter on the American River. Suter was a Swiss immigrant who had built a small agricultural empire in the Sacramento Valley. His mill foreman, James Marshall, was inspecting the mill's water channel when he noticed something glinting in the stream. What Marshall found were gold flakes, the first confirmed discovery of gold in California. But here, as what most history books do you want to tell you, Suter and Marshall tried desperately to keep the discovery secret. They knew that a gold rush would destroy Suter's carefully built agricultural business. They were right to be worried. Word of the discovery leaked within weeks, but initially, few people believed it. Californians had heard rumors of gold before, and most were skeptical. The territory had fewer than 15,000 non-Native American residents, scattered across vast distances. There were no newspapers, no telegraph lines, no way for news to spread quickly. But one man understood the opportunity immediately: Samuel Brannan, a Mormon elder and entrepreneur who owned a general store near Sutter's mill. Brannan had access to the gold discovery site and could confirm its authenticity. More importantly, he understood that the discovery itself was less valuable than the frenzy it could create. Brannan made a calculation that would define the gold rush economy. Instead of grabbing a pickaxe and joining the prospectors, he decided to become their supplier. But first, he needed customers. And to get customers, he needed to create demand. In May 1848, Brannan walked through the streets of San Francisco, holding a bottle of gold dust and shouting, "Gold! Gold! Gold from the American River." His dramatic announcement triggered the first wave of gold fever. But here's the crucial detail. Before making his announcement, Brannan had quietly bought up every pickaxe, shovel, and pan he could find in Northern California. When the first prospectors rushed to his store, Brannan was ready. He sold metal pans that had cost him 20 cents for $15 each, a markup of 7,500%. He sold pickaxes for $50 that he had purchased for $2. In his first week after the announcement, Brannan made more money than most successful prospectors would make in a year. Think about the psychology of this transaction. Prospectors were so convinced they would strike it rich that they didn't bother to negotiate prices. They needed tools immediately and were willing to pay anything to get them. Brannan had created artificial scarcity in the supply market while stimulating infinite demand through his gold promotion. Within 6 months, Brannan was making $5,000 per day, equivalent to over $150,000 in today's money. He never swung a pickaxe or panned a single stream. He had discovered something more valuable than gold. He had learned to monetize other people's dreams. The news goes viral. The California gold discovery might have remained a local phenomenon if not for President James Polk's political problems. In December 1848, Polk was facing criticism for the expensive Mexican-American War. He needed to prove that the territorial acquisitions had been worth the cost. When reports of California gold reached Washington, Polk saw an opportunity. He authenticated the discovery in his annual message to Congress, declaring that the gold deposits were more extensive than previously imagined. His presidential endorsement transformed local rumors into national headlines. The impact was immediate and unprecedented. The announcement triggered the largest voluntary mass migration in American history. By 1849, over 300,000 people had set out for California from across the United States and around the world. They called themselves 49ers, and they believed they were heading toward guaranteed riches. But the economics of this migration were catastrophic for the migrants themselves. The journey to California was expensive, dangerous, and time. Overland routes took 5 to 6 months and required substantial upfront investment in wagons, livestock, and supplies. Sea routes were faster but more expensive, costing up to $1,000 per person, equivalent to 2 years' wages for most workers. Most 49ers borrowed money to finance their journey, expecting to repay their debts with California gold. They sold their farms, mortgaged their homes, or borrowed from family members. They were making the classic speculator-esque mistake, investing money they couldn't afford to lose in an opportunity they didn't understand. Meanwhile, the smart money was moving in the opposite direction. Instead of going to the gold fields, entrepreneurs were positioning themselves along the supply routes. They established trading posts, shipping companies, and supply chains designed to extract maximum value from the gold-seeking migrants. The most successful of these supply chain entrepreneurs was Levi Strauss, a Bavarian immigrant who arrived in San Francisco in 1853. Strauss had originally planned to sell canvas tents to miners, but he quickly realized there was a bigger opportunity in work clothes. Miners were wearing out their pants at an alarming rate, and existing clothing wasn't durable enough for the harsh conditions. Strauss developed reinforced work pants using canvas and later denim fabric, strengthened with metal rivets at stress points. These waist overalls became the standard uniform of the goldfields. Strauss wasn't selling clothing. He was selling the image of the successful prospector. Miners bought his pants not just for durability, but because wearing them made them feel like they were part of the gold rush mythology, the reality of mining. While entrepreneurs like Brannan and Strauss were building fortunes, the actual gold miners were discovering the harsh realities of prosperity. The easy surface gold that Marshall had found at Sutter's Mill was quickly exhausted. By 1850, successful mining required increasingly sophisticated techniques, expensive equipment, and substantial capital investment. The average individual prospector in 1849 made about $20 per day when he found gold, but most days he found nothing. When you factor in the costs of food, equipment, and lodging in the inflated California economy, most miners were barely breaking even. Many were going deeper into debt despite working in goldfields. The problem was systematic overproduction of miners relative to available gold. Basic economics suggests that when supply of labor increases faster than demand for that labor, wages fall. In the goldfields, this meant that more prospectors chasing the same amount of gold led to diminishing returns for everyone. But the supply chain businesses faced the opposite dynamic. More miners meant more customers for tools, food, clothing, and services. The influx of 300,000 people into a territory that had previously supported 15,000 created unprecedented demand for everything except gold mining services. Food prices in the mining camps were astronomical. Eggs sold for $3 each, equivalent to $90 today. A loaf of bread cost $2.60 today. A pound of butter cost $6, $180 today. Miners were paying more for basic necessities than they were earning from their gold claims. The merchants supplying these goods were making extraordinary profits. They could buy supplies in San Francisco for normal prices and resell them in the mining camps for 10 times the cost. The transportation and storage challenges were real, but the profit margins were enormous. More importantly, the merchants had steady, predictable income streams while the miners faced feast or famine uncertainty. A store owner knew he would sell a certain amount of food and supplies every week, regardless of how much gold was discovered. A miner might strike it rich or go home empty. The platform economy emerges by 1850. The California economy had evolved into something resembling a modern platform business. The mining camps were not just places where people dug for gold. They were marketplaces where suppliers, customers, and service providers interacted in a complex ecosystem. The most successful entrepreneurs were those who positioned themselves as intermediaries rather than primary producers. They didn't dig for gold themselves. They created the infrastructure that allowed others to dig more efficiently while capturing value from every transaction. Wells Fargo, founded in 1852, exemplifies this platform strategy. The company provided banking, express delivery, and communication services to the mining camps. They transported gold from remote mining sites to San Francisco banks, shipped supplies from the city to the camps, and carried mail and messages between separated families. Wells Fargo didn't care whether individual miners struck it rich or went broke. They made money on every transaction regardless of the underlying success of the gold mining. They were monetizing the movement of money and goods, not the production of gold. The company's stagecoach routes became the circulatory system of the gold rush economy. They connected isolated mining camps to global supply chains, allowing miners to purchase goods manufactured in New York or Boston while selling their gold to buyers in London or Paris. Wells Fargo captured a percentage of every transaction flowing through this system. Think about the parallel to modern platform companies like Amazon or Uber. These businesses don't produce the goods or services their customers want. They create the infrastructure that connects suppliers with customers while extracting value from every interaction. The hotel and restaurant businesses in the mining camps operated on similar principles. They didn't need to find gold. They needed to provide services to people who were looking for gold. The more prospectors who came to town, the more customers they had for their rooms and meals. But the most sophisticated platform business was the informal banking system that emerged to handle gold transactions. Because California was far from established financial centers, Local merchants effectively became banks. They weighed gold, assessed its purity, provided credit, and facilitated transfers of value. These merchant bankers made money on every gold transaction through assaying fees, exchange rate spreads, and interest on credit. They were essentially taxing the gold economy without participating in gold production. Like modern payment processors, they captured a small percentage of a very large volume of transactions. The Chinese advantage. One group of gold rush participants understood the supply chain strategy better than anyone: Chinese immigrants. Starting in 1852, thousands of Chinese workers arrived in California, but they approached the gold rush differently than their American counterparts. While American miners focused on finding rich claims and striking it big, Chinese miners often worked claims that Americans had abandoned as they used more labor-intensive techniques that could extract gold from lower-grade deposits. But more importantly, they organized themselves into cooperative networks that provided mutual support and shared resources. Chinese miners established their own supply chains, importing food, tools, and equipment directly from China rather than buying from expensive local merchants. They created parallel economic systems that allowed them to operate more efficiently than individual American prospectors. But the most successful Chinese immigrants weren't miners at all. They were entrepreneurs who provided services to both Chinese and American mining communities. They established restaurants, laundries, and general stores that served the needs of the multicultural mining camps. Chinese restaurants were particularly successful because they could provide hot meals more cheaply than American establishments. They used less expensive ingredients, more efficient cooking methods, and cooperative labor arrangements that reduced costs. American miners, despite widespread racial prejudice, frequently ate at Chinese restaurants because they offered better value. The laundry business was similarly strategic. Mining was dirty work, and miners needed regular clothes washing services. Chinese immigrants dominated this market by offering faster, cheaper, and more reliable service than their competitors. They turned a basic necessity into a profitable business opportunity. These service businesses were more stable and ultimately more profitable than gold mining itself. The speculation economy. As the gold rush matured, the most sophisticated money-making schemes moved away from physical mining altogether into pure financial speculation. Mining claims became tradable assets, bought and sold based on perceived rather than actual value. Promoters would stake claims in areas with minimal gold deposits, then create elaborate marketing campaigns to sell shares to distant investors. They would distribute samples of gold-bearing rock, circulate exaggerated geological reports, and promise enormous returns to naive investors in eastern cities. These early mining stocks traded on the San Francisco Stock Exchange, which became one of the most active financial markets in the world. Speculators could buy and sell mining claims without ever visiting the actual mining sites. The disconnect between paper values and physical reality created opportunities for massive manipulation. The most successful stock promoters understood that they were selling stories, not mines. Investors wanted to believe in the possibility of massive gold discoveries, so promoters crafted narratives that satisfied this psychological need. They used technical geological language, impressive-sounding company names, and celebrity endorsements to create credibility. But the underlying business model was extracting money from investors rather than gold from the ground. Many promoted mines never produced significant quantities of gold, but the promoters made fortunes selling shares to optimistic speculators. This speculation economy created its own ecosystem of winners and losers. Sophisticated investors who understood the promotional game could profit by buying early and selling before the inevitable collapse. Naive investors who believed the promotional materials typically lost their entire investment. The parallels to modern financial speculation are obvious. The gold rush created many of the techniques still used in stock promotion, from creating artificial scarcity to exploiting information asymmetries between insiders and outside investors. The platform winners. By 1855, when the easy gold was exhausted and the gold rush began to wind down, the clear winners were not the miners but the platform providers. Samuel Brannan had become one of California's wealthiest men without ever mining for gold. Levi Strauss had built a clothing empire that would outlast the gold rush by more than a century. Wells Fargo had established a financial network that dominated Western commerce. These platform businesses had several advantages over gold mining itself. They had diversified revenue streams that didn't depend on any single gold discovery. They had scalable business models that became more profitable as more participants joined the gold rush economy. The lesson of the California gold rush is not that gold mining was but that the most reliable profits came from providing infrastructure rather than participating directly in the speculative activity. The pickaxe sellers understood something that the gold seekers missed. In any gold rush, the real money is in selling pick. This pattern has repeated throughout American economic history. During the railroad boom, the biggest profits went to suppliers of steel and equipment rather than railroad operators. During the internet bubble, companies like Cisco that provided networking infrastructure outperformed most .com startups. The California Gold Rush established the template for America's approach to economic speculation. Create a platform that captures value from other people's risk-taking, rather than taking the risks yourself. It was the birth of the American platform economy, built on the dreams of suckers with gold fever. The 49ers who traveled to California seeking instant wealth mostly returned home poorer than when they started. But the entrepreneurs who sold them supplies, services, and dreams built fortunes that lasted for generations. Sometimes the real treasure isn't what you're digging for. It's what you're selling to the people who are digging. I'm John, and this is the Cinematic History Tales channel. Subscribe now to stay ahead of the curve. Because when the history books are written, you'll want to be among the few who saw it coming. The next gold rush is already beginning somewhere.